Well, I guess let's go ahead and get started. Thanks for being here. For those of you who are, and for those of you who are not here, hopefully you're able to catch this on YouTube. So the objective of today, and you will see this in the subsequent weeks. The idea is to recap the weekly stats. If there's any change in usage, if there is anything noteworthy about the game, can update the league on the stats. Um, I think you're gonna find that maybe some of the stats in the games went in a slightly different way than maybe you guys were expecting. Um, Neil says that 91 missed sleep powders in game three. That definitely
Oh,
sounds like I'm not playing the league because I didn't think it would be appropriate for me to play since I was one of the sponsors. But yeah, that sounds like my game where I missed 91 sleep powders. In games one, two, and three, probably that's more like it. And probably 91 crits too. um, so I guess with that, let's go ahead and start with the stats. I think one of the cool things about what we are doing here is that we effectively created our own format. I know that it has been played a little bit in uh, during the official tournaments, like the side events have been using this, but there really isn't a whole lot of data on this format because people just play it randomly and enjoy it, but there isn't a lot of data. So wanted to make sure that we put something to just share the general perspective of what's going on. This is the top 10 on the left side. We have the top 10 months in usage. I think for the most part, none of this is surprising. I made a video last week about what I thought the meta would look like. There were a few months that definitely skipped my mind. There were a few that maybe I just didn't pay attention to. I think one of them is Sylveon. I think Sylveon is definitely very strong in the format, and I just when I was working on the video, I just didn't think about it. Um, but that was kind of one that called my attention. I don't know from your perspective, NJ. Not sure if anything here stands out for you.
I mean, like most of the top mons are like your usual, culprits and Nomax, right? You have the two pivots at the top within Cinderella, and then obviously like Urshifu and Aleki probably form like in terms of like type coverage with electric and water and fighting as well. It's just really good, and also having special and physical kind of like a type of damage coming out. So I think like your top four make a lot of sense, but I think as you kind of go down, I wouldn't have expected like mons like Zarina. Like even though I myself have been enjoying using it, I wouldn't have expected Zarina and Sylveon to be 8 and 9. Um,
Agreed.
and even Neon Ligo at like being that high up. Like I know like Meteor Beam sets are quite popular just because of like the sheer power
Mm-hmm.
that you can have with Meteor Beam, but like other than that, I didn't think it had the versatility that it would climb up like as high as we've seen it go in this first week of usage. But like other than that, you can Amoonguss is always kind of like around, especially when you're pairing it with like fake out users like Instant and Rillaboom. So I expected like Amoonguss to be kind of hanging around Landorus, Aleki, or she like. But it's interesting to see like Nihiligo, Zarina, and Sylveon kind of in the top 10 here.
So one of the interesting things here is also though it's the same culprits as maybe some of the other formats, and except maybe the Landers and Iligo and Serena Sylveon, they play in a slightly different way. So in the previous meta, Instant was mostly Sugarberry. I think based on the matches that I saw, most of them were Citrusberry. I think there were still a few goggles out there, but for the most part, it was some sort of a pinchberry or a citrusberry. Among Us is mostly Rocky Helmet, and one of the reasons for that is you switch it in over instant for an Urshifu, you take 3 Rocky Helmet hits on the 13 strikes, right? So it is the same culprits, but now all of a sudden you don't need to worry about Airstream and you don't need the Koba Berry. So that's something that definitely called my attention. Neil says that no one's running Charty stomping instinct. So I was actually talking to NJ earlier, and he did say that he saw a few stomping tantrum incinerators because I want to
Yeah,
say Stakataka and Heatran. I
yeah,
didn't
yeah.
see
I've
any,
seen a
but yeah,
couple for those two.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, I thought that was interesting. I didn't. If you ask me, Instin's broken enough, and it doesn't need that kind of coverage move. But interesting that people would still run that. I don't know about Chartiberry, but that would definitely be good stack tech, or Nihiligo tech for that matter. So that's kind of cool. Um, so on that same note, looking on the right and looking at the common pairs, there's actually a stat error. Number two, Instant and Rila is actually 17. I think the stat either recognized Instant Rila and Rila Instant as a separate group, or Rila as Gmax and Rila non Gmax as two different ones. I know you can Dynamax, but it's just the way that the stacks were tracked. So it's actually 17. So that one's actually the highest pairing at almost 40%. Not quite 40%, but almost 40%. Um, so, and I think absolutely everybody expected that to be the most common pairing. I think the two things that caught my attention the most here were the Eleki Serena and the um, and the Sylveon showing up three times in this list, right? Like Sylveon is number 9 in usage. It was used on 9 games, but it was paired with some of these 7 times. So what that tells me is that basically the teams that had Sylveon basically had Insane, Urshifu, and Rillaboom always. So that's kind of a skewed stat. It was basically like people were running that core with those 3 or 4 Pokemon, if that makes sense. Um, the Alekis Arena calls my attention because in working with some of the people in the different teams that reach out for help, where they told me they wanted to use Aleki, I had a very specific comment someone made to me where they said that running Aleki is not worth without Serena, because if not, you would need to EV Regieleki for a Rillaboom Grassy Glide. Not sure what's your take on that. I think I have a slightly different take, so I wanted to see what you thought.
Yeah, I think like with Serena, what Serena lets you do is you're really able to maximize like a Lecky's speed and power. Like especially in this type of format where we're not where we're seeing like in terms of speed tiers, like a Lecky really probably wants to be timid max speed because you're also maximizing the damage output with Electro Ball.
Mm-hmm.
And so being able to go 252 to 52 next to Zarina lets you maximize your offense in the Trick Room leads, lets you play just a bit more. Like, you just knowing that you're fast and offensive and you haven't had to put like 44 EVs into like defense to take like a rogue like Grassy Glide or any other type of like priority attack gives you a lot of flexibility and probably also lets you calc for double ups a bit better, right? Like, you know, at least for me when I use the pairing, being able to know how much attack I need with triple tackle, and then pairing that up with like max special attack specs like Volt Switch or Electro Ball into common Pokemon, and just having that ice and electric kind of combination. Bolt beam coverage is really nice between those two. So I think like you mentioned earlier, it's it's really easy to use those two together. They can play off of each other really well.
Agreed. So my take is I do like them together, but I don't know that you have to play them together. So I did a test where I gave Aleki choice specs without Serena, and I think I gave it was either 92 or 100 defense, and that was like a 6 or 12% roll on a 116 plus Miracle Seed Rillaboom. I think in my video I kept calling it Grassy Seed, but it's obviously Miracle Seed's what I meant. Um, if you give it like 100 defense, it can still tank it. So the premise of my team was I still had Incineroar on that team, so you could easily just switch in an instant there, or if you couldn't intimidate, you could still tank it, and you had choice specs. And I think Electrowall was doing 70 to 80% to Amoonguss, depending on how you trained it. So I see the logic on why people are running it that way, but I would say don't limit yourself to only running Aleki that way. And of the 17 Alekis, I think it seems like only 7 of them were with Serena. But it was definitely one of the more common pairings, so I wanted to throw that out there. Don't limit yourself to only doing it that way, because I think there's other ways to do it. Um, I'm gonna throw out that I kind of expected Kingdra to be in the top 10. Um, I expected a dragon to be in the top 10. And I know there's a lot of ice, and I know there's a lot of fairy, but I think there's a couple of dragons that I think can be very strong. So, and as we go through the matchups, like we'll call out a few of those teams that I'm a little surprised that Rain wasn't higher. I'm a bit surprised that um, Dragonite wasn't higher in the list. I don't remember the exact position, but I looked for it. It wasn't very high. I think there was only one Komodo team. Rain doesn't suck. It's so good. People just don't know how to run it. Dragonite is excellent, Izzy. What are you talking about? It's so good. People just haven't figured it out. I actually, so apparently Sun won that tournament, to your point. In my video, I shit on Sun and I was like, I haven't figured it out. Hey, thanks for the follow, Tau. I actually shit on Sun because I was like, I don't know if this is any good, and then it went and won the the first tournament. So what the heck do I know? But I had been talking to a couple of people about like how would you run Indeedee Hatterin and like with Torkoal, and then it would be obviously be Lilligant, but like I hadn't quite figured out how to do it, and then I think it was Battle Room won that tournament with Stack, Hatterin, and Sun. So I was like, oh, this is how you run it. That makes sense. I hadn't quite gotten that far with it, but that was a good team. I think Rain works. I think you need a Specs Kingdra to make it work. Depending on how you train an AV Rillaboom, you can actually one-shot it. I think that the problem that I see people having is that people tell me that you need to make it timid so you outspeed Regieleki. And that's not true. So it's not wrong, but you don't have to run it that way. There's ways that you can play around that, but it's kind of a weird thing. Regidraco is kind of... So Tabu says that Dragonite isn't too bad. And Izzy says that Regidraco's better. So I think they do different things. So Dragonite can actually two-shot a lot of things with extreme speed. If you give it a helping hand, it can actually one-shot up a bunch of things. So it can actually one-shot a +1 Volcarona as well, assuming you don't get burned. But it can. So there's a couple of interesting things, and I think I'm looking out for next week now that Sun won the first tournament. I'm curious to see how the stats are going to change for next week. Any final comments on the stats and the pairings?
No, I think like week one, just everyone's super experimental, and I think these stats are obviously subject to a lot of change. I don't expect Sylveon, for example, even though like Sylveon would in the common pairs you see it with Incin, which like every mon that it's paired with there helps it do its role better, with like Rillaboom providing it with like recovery and Incin obviously providing it cover for steel types, as well as Urshifu breaking steel types for it. But I think as we progress, we're just going to see kind of a rotating cast of what people are playing that week next to kind of the more common Pokemon. Like I don't see Incin, Rillaboom, or Shifu. And I think maybe we see Tapu Fini a bit higher. I just think people are going to figure out ways to kind of evolve their offensive picks around common fire, water, grass cores. And so
For sure.
and I could even see Amoonguss and Fini maybe pushing up a bit higher as we start settling into this format. So
I expect Lando to drop, and I expect Fini, and potentially Amoonguss to climb. So that's a good insight on your end as well. Sylveon actually, and I don't fixate on the win rates. But Sylveon had 9 games, and it lost the majority of the matches. So something to look out for there. People, fixating on that, I don't know how people are going to react. And then with the climb of Sun, Stack, Hatterin, and so forth. So looking out for that for next week for sure. Going into the matchups, I am going to let you run with this one. You are actually the manager of the team, so you can obviously speak to this much better than I can. The one thing that caught my attention, and we were going through this as we were reviewing here, is you guys lost 5 and 3, and then 2 of your maybe 3 top players got 2-0'd this week. So that was definitely something that maybe just one of them wins, and then that would have completely changed the match. I think a lot of these games were also seems like they were kind of close too. So not sure what's your take on this one.
yeah, I think it's a pretty like seesaw week. Like we started down 0-2, then we climbed back, and then we were up 3-2, and then we proceeded to lose the last kind of stretch of games. So I think like the score is pretty like it's like the way you see it laid out here. Visually, it's kind of like how it went. And yeah, like you said, like Joe and Adi, obviously they had a bit of a rough matchup, and I watched Adi set, and even though it seems like at least with five of his mons, he'd have a pretty like decent chance with the speed control into Z's team. Like Z was able to obviously leverage that Amoonguss, the pressure of that Amoonguss to kind of force Adi into awkward positions where he wasn't able to really set Trick Room. And within like Joe's match, that was the team actually that Colin managed to win the tour this weekend with. But
Mm-hmm.
I think when he was playing Novak was able to like leverage his Instant and Rillaboom really nicely, and the fact that he had two terrain changes really allowed him to get around psychic terrain, and being able to cycle two fake out mons really gave Joe a lot of it gave him a lot of trouble being able to set Trick Room first and then keep applying pressure with Trick Room up. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think huge props to the Araquanids. Their prep with those two matches really it was really good. Um, Obviously with the Zelda and Suset, like their match was definitely like I think it was definitely really close. Zelda was really trying to leverage his Sylveon a lot. He wanted to set that up and kind of use that to break down the majority of his team, but I think Susedge was able to play his Nihi really well. And he kind of just went the route of Nihilego with his Fire, Water, Grass and surrounding it with a lot of support. And once Nihilego starts to snowball and pick up Beast Boost, it started to give I think Zelda a little bit of a problem, especially towards like games 2 and 3. So I think those three matches, I think the way those went in particular, and the way they were spaced out as well, those were really kind of pivotal. I didn't manage to catch like the stream match this week with Ally and Tiny, but um, that one maybe was perhaps a bit more of a decisive one for us. And I did manage to catch Tabu's match against Zanzibar, and
Mm-hmm.
I think Tabu managed to position his tools really, really nicely in that matchup. I watched the first game. I think Zanzibar wasn't able to kind of get his heat train into a position late in the game where like he would have been able to beat down like potential threats like Rillaboom or Ferrothorn. I think once the heat train got sacked in that matchup, Tabu was really able to come in and clean up and not being able to get set and break down the team because that's really what Sarina, Aleki, and Urshifu want to do is they want to get offense out like really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he wasn't able to really get into a flow there, and Tabu was just able to clutch that one out. Um, I didn't manage to catch a Ball Shots match with Neptune. I did hear that Neptune was subbed in for one of players this week. So it's very commendable that they were able to pick up the team within like 15, I think 10, 15 minutes, and they were able to put in a pretty strong performance there. I think this was really kind of like an example where we managed to get the team matchup right because Krawl's a very, very scary player. Um, and so kind of just lucking out in that matchup in terms of we managed to get a very strong sub in, and then they also managed to get a very good team advantage. Um, and yeah, as for our Series 13 matches towards the end here, I didn't manage to see all of our Series 13 matches just because I was a bit busy. But again, another seesaw, right? Like it was split down the middle with Rinkai taking it for them and then the ZLBD taking it for us. So um, yeah, like I think really like the week was decided with by like obviously Joe, Adi, and Zelda towards the top for us. And um, like looking ahead for both teams, I think the Araquanids have a really, really strong, like it's a really strong win for them, and they've given themselves a pretty strong foundation moving forward. Um, and then for us as well, I think we learned a lot about like building in Spikemouth and kind of what we should be expecting against some of our players. So yeah, I think all in all, pretty good week. We didn't get blown out. It was a pretty competitive week. We had some pretty good moments, some not so good moments, and I think both teams have a lot to take away from the week.
for sure. Great insight, man. Thanks for all the detail
So
there.
yeah, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Yeah, yeah, no, thanks for the insight, man. It's great detail that you shared here. Um, I think a couple of things that called my attention here. So Susa's team, I literally built the exact same team on my side. That was like the first team I built for the format. I actually I played a side event in Frankfurt with those 6 months, and I think I came out second in the side event. Um, I think maybe did it wasn't Nihilego. It was might have been Gothitel instead of Nihilego. But when I went back a couple of weeks ago, when Izzy told me that we were doing this, I went back and redid it, and I was like, no, I'm gonna put this here because I need something to hit the fairies. Because Como can just get out of control. I had a version with Kartana instead of Rillaboom, and I had a version with Rillaboom. If you can position Komodo correctly, Komodo just automatically wins. I think I had given Kartana Night Slash as well, so you could actually hit the likes of the Dust Clubs and Spectreers and so forth. But I know why people think I'm insane to say that like Komodo is good because there's a lot of fairy types, but it has two extremely good abilities. It has the ability to be immune to Sylveon, and it has the ability to be immune to Among Us effectively. So, like, it's if you position that thing correctly, you can't kill it. The other thing that caught my attention was Tao's team with the Slowbro. I asked him on chat while you were talking. He said that one of his friends dared him to use it, and he was like, "YOLO, I'm gonna do it, and I'm gonna play." He managed to win the game, so maybe it's not that bad. It's still a poison type. It's a psychic type, so it's still hitting Among Us. So
It's a singles powerhouse, but I don't know how good it can be in doubles, but it's a singles powerhouse. So
yeah,
yeah, it's not bad, but it's pretty bulky. But
yeah. I'm not gonna sit here and tell you that it's good. I'm just saying it might not be as bad as people think. Um, so going to the next one. Um, so on paper, this looks like a powerful win. But if you maybe dig a little bit deeper, most of the matches were 2-on-1. One of them was a forfeit. Not sure what the story is there. Not important.
yeah, I think it was an activity when I think
Yeah.
something happened on the copper side. So
Yeah,
that
but
was a bit unfortunate.
I don't think it wouldn't have made any difference even if they won. So the activity doesn't really matter. Um, One of the interesting things too is, again, we see that combination of like Clefairy, Dragonite, and Nihilego. There were three teams that had that core. I think it's either the exact same team or almost the same team. Um, the other thing that caught my attention here is one team had Pelipper, which I want to say it was a combination of I want to make Urshifu stronger, and I want to prevent Reggie from taking a fire move, especially if I can get it set up. I would assume it was an Iron Defense stat. I didn't actually see the game. Um, the other thing that caught my attention is of all Series 13 matches, this was the only one where Seishin was not in the lineup of all Series 13 games. I think it's very weird not to use Seishin, especially given the fact that you're going to have 3 or 4 restricteds, but they won the week, and it was actually the only 2-0 on their side. The other side had another 2-0. Hey, thanks for the follow, Bat. So that was the only 2-0 there. So kind of something interesting to note. So I've had a few people talk to me about the whole Sableye Shedinja Kyurem dynamic. I ran a little bit of Kyurem towards the end of the previous series. I ran it in a very different way. Hey Eldritch, thanks for a follow, mate. I ran it in a very different way, but if you manage to position this thing correctly, if you don't need to worry about Dynamax as well. So you don't need to worry about Merwins as well. So kind of an interesting thing. Bet says that GX only uses one team, and he had 0 MU. Yeah, that's unfortunate. I mean, it was. you would look at this and say, oh, you have Station. Station can basically one shot a bunch of things here. Not really. It's really difficult to get rid of that Shedinja with the team that they had. I don't know if any of the mons that they had could actually beat the Shedinja. So to Bat's point, it was a very very unfavorable MU for them. And I think kind of a great pick on Argard's side, bringing the Shedinja, knowing that people aren't necessarily as worried about it, because you have quote unquote so much coverage. So I don't know. I think it was an interesting pick, and I wanted to call that one out. Um, I find interesting that both teams on the Castelia side had Ice Horse. Thought that was very interesting. I also thought it was very interesting looking at the matchups that won on the Castelia side. That Tapulele was a very interesting pick. That was one where I was like, I feel like it's good, but I think we need to figure out how to run it. I think that team that Torviv was running has three damage dealers and effectively three support ones. You can argue that Incin is offensive depending on what the MU is. It can obviously hit the Whimsicots, the Celestelas if it's not set up, and the Serenas, Whimsicots, and so forth. It can hit it. And Amungus can also do a lot of work, even being a support. P2 can get download. In this format, people aren't going to be running Foul Play Eerie Impulse. They're going to be running download, so it's going to hit hard. At least if you get the special attack boost. But Ellie said that Borgie beat three people. Yeah, you basically kill Suicune and you win on that match. It probably had Snarl. Is I think what Bad was saying. But yeah, that's effectively what the only way to beat Shedinja there. But I don't know. I thought it was interesting because that team feels like it doesn't have that much damage, and on paper, I almost want to say that Ray had a better matchup. I don't know the context of the match. I don't know if it was recorded or streamed. I haven't watched all the games. But I'm very curious, to maybe reach out to them and understand how that match went. Because on paper, I feel like Ray had the matchup, and I don't know if I'm maybe overcomplicating it there, but I don't know. Interesting thing there.
I mean, Torbeat's team has a really his Landor side really goes pretty crazy in the matchup. It can one shot. Whimsicott can do upwards of 50, 60%, even to very, very bulky. Even if that Zorino's AV would be taking a lot from Sludge Bomb. Feeny doesn't want to take Sludge Bomb.
Right.
He and Heatran get one shot by Earth Power. So we really, on Ray's side, you only have one ball. And so yeah, I think in that regard, as long as Torby played pretty well around that Celestia, he had a really, really strong breaker there in Landor's side. So I could see how that matchup wasn't as close.
Yeah, it's probably to your point. Like if you set up Celesteela, then you're screwed, because basically only Instant can kill it. But then it seems like Celo isn't a problem.
Porygon 2 and Lele could potentially hit it if they have Thunderbolt.
Right.
And I don't know how Torby would have approached it, but he would have had to play his Incineroar and Porygon extremely, extremely well, and potentially even his Amogus in that situation. So.
Yep.
But yeah, again, two high-level players going at it there, so I think in that instance it is a game of margins.
Yep.
Torby was able to come out on top, so.
Well, one of the things that we also hadn't talked about is, so if you look at Angelo's team, the Naganadel, so I made a comment in my video that I don't know that I expressed it the way that I intended it. I think Naganadel is one of the mons that has the highest potential in the format, because it has... So people would typically run 3 moves to protect, and they would make it in such a way that they get speed boosts, right? That makes perfect sense to me. That thing also gets Nasty Plot. So I think if you figure out a way to set it up, run a Nasty Plot, get a KO, all of a sudden you're faster than everything, you are hitting harder on everything, you're one-shotting everything, you potentially have a Scarf or Shifu that is going to hit you with a Wicked Blow, with a Choice Band or whatever that is, or with a Scarf. and you're one-shotting it back because you're +2 or whatever that might be. So I feel like it's someone that has a very high potential. There were not that many this week, but it's definitely something to look out for because I think it's someone that can be very strong. So just wanted to throw that
I
one out
will
there.
add, I will add though, looking at that matchup, I didn't really get to watch it, but just like at first glance, it looks like good scouting on the striker's part for Angelo because you see like obviously the Gondel and Tailwind. Being able to Tailwind and then get a speed boost in Tailwind gives Ink's team a lot of problems.
Yeah.
Enables Nagano to one shot Dracovish if it's Scarf, gives it the ability to hit Tapu Koko really hard, allows it to take out Rillaboom. So, um, and then as well, I think Ink mentioned that the Whimsicott also had Encore, so Tornado's clicking Tailwind, and if they Tailwind on the same turn, having the ability to lock the opposing Tornadoes into Encore. So I think those two Pokemon in particular are very, very strong.
Yep.
But yeah, huge shoutouts to Ink for managing to grab a game because that seems like a matchup that was pretty favorable for Angelo.
Agreed.
So good scouting from them and being able to win that matchup. But yeah, Ink was able to claw a game out and still give himself some outs there, I think. So.
Yep, agreed. No, very good insight there. So to the next one. So these two teams, when I looked at the draft, they feel like they're two of the 3 or 4 best teams just on paper. Um, the interesting thing to me is if you look on the Dream Eater side, Bengi, Sohaib, and Neil lost the week, which really called my attention. I mean, obviously they lost to very good players. It was very expensive players on the draft. Toronto and Galvanics are very, very high level players that are recognized. But it's definitely something that kind of caught my attention there. And there were good teams. There were good matchups. Not good matchups in the sense of they had a favorable matchup. I mean the players had good matchups. So I don't know. It called out my attention that it was like first 4 teams lost and one on the one side, and then on the flip side, on the right side there's a Gardevoir, which I certainly wasn't necessarily expecting it. On the left side, looking at Raikou with a Volcanion, I did a little bit of Volcanion testing myself, and I did it expecting it to be completely broken, and then I realized I wasn't that big of a fan. But I don't know. They also had Danetti had the. It seems like it's exactly the same team, or almost exactly the same team, as the other. It's not exactly the same because the other one I think it didn't have Station, but it's basically an extremely similar team. And this one, with the Tailwind mode, and they won. They had actually 2 answers to Shedinja. They were still able to win. You had Kyurem for Yveltal, you had the Sableye and the Shadow Rider to be able to hit the other Shadow Rider. So it feels like it was maybe a little bit more even if you managed to play around the Tailwind and the Regieleki. I had someone said that the Celtics would 8-0 them. Nah, man. So I think the Dream Eaters have an extremely deep draft. I mean, I really like the Torkoal team. Any of these matches could have completely changed the dynamic. There were 3 2-on-1s. But now, man, I think these 2 teams are really good. I would expect to see both of this in playoffs. So to me, this is not an upset. I do not agree with that. I think these are 2 teams that you should expect to see in the playoffs.
Yeah, I will add as well, like, it's kind of 2 different draft philosophies going at it. You have the Celtics Torkoal where they kind of went for, broke with their first couple, first 4-ish picks. They spent heavily on Oe and Terran, obviously bringing in Calmonix as a manager as well. So you're investing in going really hard with your top half of your roster and really banking on making sure that you make smart picks towards the second half of the draft, and that a combination of some of those players can pick up 1 to 2 wins for you to eke out like six twos, five threes. Um, and you see like the Dream Eaters, they really kind of sat back and wanted to take a more balanced approach to their draft. They managed to grab all the players they wanted, but they went for an approach where they went for getting a deeper draft, having a more balanced overall roster. And yeah, it's kind of funny how you see like the first four, the top half of like the Totals roster kind of win, and then you see kind of like some of the picks that they made towards the second half of the draft um, not kind of match up as well into the Dream Eaters, where I think the Dream Eaters, the depth of their draft shows towards the second half of the results page there, as they were able to clutch out those four wins. So
Mm-hmm.
you kind of see that reflected in the standings this week in terms of what the two teams had going into the draft. And um, I think for both of them, there's no right way. There's no right way to do a draft, and we'll kind of see like where these two teams go as the season progresses. But I just think it's really interesting to see like one style wasn't proven right, and like a draw. So
Agreed.
at the
Agreed.
same time, we'll really tell.
It's all I think I've talked to a lot of managers over the many leagues that I've joined, either as a player or whatever, and everybody has a different strategy, and one isn't necessarily better than the other. To your point, it's just a matter of how you're gonna approach it, and to your point, it was a full display here. The two conflicting approaches, and they went even. So let's see what adjustments these guys are gonna make, and then see where they end up in the season. Because on the left side, I played a league with Dark George and Raiko, and they're definitely nothing to sneeze at. These guys are good. The other two players, Psycho and Scotty, I'm not familiar with, but I'm very much looking forward for learning from them in this league and seeing what they have to offer. So we'll see. I mean, I expect to see both of these in playoffs. So that's kind of my take on this so far. Um, then from here, I believe this is the last matchup. Um, the first one I think was one of the ones on stream. Both equal the same Dragonite teams. I would assume they either built together or they prepped together, and they were like, yeah, let's go ahead and run this. I'm not sure what the story there is.
I
Wait,
think
hang on.
both of those players as well at the draft. There
Mhm.
were two Chinese players that Helios prioritized getting. I think like just glancing at the results, you can see that they were working together this week.
Yep.
Um, Clearly, like that decision, at least early on, is paying off for them. Having that synergy in terms of like they were on the same team, they were probably practice together and bounce ideas up one. Probably what ended up being the difference in two sets that went 3 games. Uh, so
Well, one of
I
the
think that's
one of the things that called my attention here was the Buswell on Francis team. Um, so they had three Ultra Beasts in this team. Um, so that one kind of called my attention. I feel like Buswell has been one of the problems with the Dynamax meta, and I think one of the issues that existed in team building in general was that effectively most of your max Pokemon needed, like your main max Pokemon needed to either carry Airstream or Chlorophyll or some way of getting faster. No, obviously that wasn't the only mechanic to do that, but that was kind of your main max typically had that mechanism. And as a consequence, there were a lot of Pokemon that suffered. For example, Buzzwole, that's four times weak to it. Um, so I feel like in this format where you don't need to worry with Airstream as much, I feel like an Assault Vest Buzzwole can potentially do something there. This particular matchup didn't seem like it went their way. I don't see how you consistently beat the likes of Komodo and Fini having the and Rillaboom basically, because when you go through all of the different options here, um, like there's effectively a one-to-one answer to it that lets you combo endgame. Um, so because combo can endgame P2 etc. The only thing it can't endgame is Tapu Fini, unless you're behind sub and you're +4 and you're faster. Like it's a very neat scenario where you can beat Tapu Fini with combo. So I think as long as you remove Fini, Como basically just beats the rest of the team if you are in misty terrain, because then all of a sudden, then Naganadel cannot one shot Como anymore. So as long as you go around that, um, you can basically set up. I don't know if that Metagross was Ice Punch potentially to hit the Naganadel. Naganadel, I would assume it maybe carried a fire move as well, but if you manage to just remove that, Como just wins the matchup. And the Fini, right? So I think there's a couple of things there. So what caught my attention here was the two equal teams with the Dragonite. The Cresselia called my attention. I believe that was the only Cresselia, or one of two Cresselias. Yeah, there were two actually. It was the two on the same week. The Buswell called my attention as well. And then on the Series 13 side of things, they're two very, very strong and two of the more expensive players on the right side that played Series 13. So not sure what was the strategy there on that, but that was an interesting take to have those two guys run the Series 13 matches.
Yep. I think obviously CML versus Hobbit, huge matchup. Hobbit's no slouch. He's currently undefeated in World Cup as well, so definitely very, very strong. But CML proving to be, um, equally up to the task there. It kind of just proving why Helios wanted him on as a player manager this week, and then obviously Gahaku, again, very, very good Japanese player, and just someone you expect to see pretty good finishes in the Battle Stadium ladder with. He always has some type of creative twist on sometimes standard builds, or he has some really, really interesting teams that he comes up with. So yeah, those two being able to nab you your Series 13 wins gives you a very, very solid foundation on which your other players in Spike Myth can maybe afford to make a couple of mistakes, or you can afford a couple of losses if those two are able to get you the win. So it's a very good strategy to put two very strong players on Series 13. I think you might see more teams adopt that, especially because having two Series 13 slots kind of allows you to put two people together that can work together throughout the week, kind of bounce ideas off one another, and they're kind of just going to be doing their own thing while the other six people are getting ready for Spike Myth. So yeah, so if they can build that as a pair, maybe as the season progresses, where you see CML and Gaku playing a lot of the Series 13 and having consistency and winning a lot, you could see Tokyo, the Tokyo Thunder's steamrolling a lot of the right? 6-2, 5-3 margins, maybe even 7-1 Rainbows. So definitely a team to watch out for.
Yeah, for sure. No, very, very good stuff, man. So I think this is the last slide that we have here. Not sure if anyone has any further general comments in here that they want to share about what we saw in the week, or if you have any other insight or anything that you're looking forward to next week here, NJ.
Yeah, the next week, I think for the teams that won this week, really good starts for them. It's always nice to nab a win week one. But for the teams that weren't able to win this week, I think it's definitely going to be an upwards trajectory for a couple of them. They'll be able to learn the I won't say mistakes, because there were a lot of close games. A lot of games went to 3 games. So I think for them it's just a good learning experience, figuring out what to adjust, and it's always in those situations, it's always where you're going from here. So I look at maybe World Cup where France got 8-0'd by Mexico, and then they proceeded to go on a pretty long run. So similarly, if any teams in a team tour do face a setback, it's not the end of the world. There's a lot of things that you can just change and do better. And I think a couple of these teams are going to see them uh, bounce back in a big way next week. So really looking forward to seeing who's able to manage that.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. No, great insights here, and thank you so much for joining me today. I know this was kind of last minute for you, so thank you.
Yeah, no, it's
Thank
all
you so
good.
much
It's all
for
good.
stepping in. Please follow this guy as well. He's one of the managers in the league. Follow him on Twitter, Twitch, everywhere. He's freaking goat, man. I literally texted him like, please, I need help. He was like, yeah, dude, I'll get it done. Don't worry about it. Let's meet up and work on this. So thank you so much for doing this.
No worries. No worries. You made it seamless.
Thank you so much. So we'll be doing this every week. Hopefully, should be every Monday. Should be around the same time. Maybe we'll try to potentially announce that a little bit sooner. But now that you guys know that this is happening, maybe more of you can join. For those of you that maybe arrived a little bit late, this is gonna go up on YouTube probably tomorrow or Wednesday as well. So feel free to reach out if there's anything that you think that we missed. If there's anything that you specifically want me or whoever the guest managers are to talk about next week. Or if you want to come hang out with me next week and maybe do a little bit of the analysis here, reach out to me, especially if you're one of the managers. I would love to have you here and go through this with you. So I think what we're going to do now at this point is rate someone. I don't think there's anyone actually playing VGC right now, because who the heck plays ladder this time at this point in life. But let's maybe rate somebody who's playing Unite, if you guys are interested. So we're gonna rate.
Yeah, I don't see too many people on right now. I think Temporal is streaming, so maybe Temporal.
Is Temporal streaming? Is Temporal the? I don't believe I'm following on this
Temporal
account.
VGC.
Temporal VGC. Let's try that. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and rate them. Are you 100% sure they're live?
Yeah,
Okay.
it shows that they're live.
Okay, let's go ahead and do that. I'm following them on the other account, not on this one, so I'll make sure to do that when I join. So, thank you so much, everyone, and thanks for being here. Have a good one.
Take care. Bye bye.